This PowerPoint supports the human resource issues internal. Today we're looking at primarily the terms retention, redundancy, redeployment, and recruitment. So retention is keeping employees. Okay, a very important part of the human resource process because once you've recruited your employees, you want to be keeping them. You don't really want them to be leaving after 6 months because that will therefore avoid further recruitment costs. And as recruitment is so expensive in the first place, um, it's incredibly important that you keep these people. It also allows the organisation to develop their culture because hopefully through the recruitment process they would have selected those people who are going to further the organisation's culture and the growth of the culture and their values. So therefore keeping these people is very important to developing the culture. If you've got people who are people who have been working a long time in the organisation, obviously they are going to get more and more specialised in the areas in which they work. And for that, obviously, as we've seen with specialisation, division of labour, that sort of idea, we have an increase in productivity. But it's really to keep people. There's important things that we need to. So keeping people, it's got to be effective by using successful motivational practices, whichever way they seem fit and fits into the organisation practice. But this is a key way to keeping people retained. Appraising people, making sure you're measuring their performance and how well you are judging them against distinct benchmarks or quality standards, whatever it may be. This gives the opportunity to possibly give a pat on the back to those people working there, which is in itself is motivational. But furthermore, it also identifies the need for training and development, which is also a motivational practice. So retention is a clear part of the human resource process. It's not just it's not just a case of recruit these people, get them in, and then they work. No, you've got to work at keeping them in the organisation. Another thing which isn't really mentioned here is that it's very important to keep them satisfied and keep them in the organisation because particularly if they are key members of the organisation, they are prone to being poached by other organisations or being headhunted. So retention is a key part of the process. Redundancy, on the other hand, redundancy is a very sensationalist word, and it's a very negative word. Effectively, for want of a better word, it is used as firing people. But often it's what an organisation does when they're looking to cut costs. If they're having a bit of a downturn, if there's issues that are rising, which has meant that there's a squeeze on their profit levels or their costs. Largely, it basically means that people's contracts aren't being renewed. It is a very difficult thing to manage, and very often it is the very last resort for an organisation. Now, in class, we've been talking about the Cadbury's issue and them closing down the factory and making 362 people redundant. This is not a light decision. It is very negative. It has a bad reputation, but also, although it's a cost-cutting process, in the short term, it is incredibly expensive. Like you have to remunerate each person who's being made redundant with some sort of redundancy package. That could be a percentage of the salary. It could be a retraining program, methods to be seen that you are trying to re-employ these people in other areas. So it is incredibly expensive in the short term, very bad for the reputation, which can also be a very big long-term issue. The idea is that obviously in the long term there may be a different strategic direction that the organisation is taking, and for that reason it may be cost saving in the long term. An alternative to redundancy sometimes is redeployment, and this is where you are looking potentially at your different jobs in the organisation. It's clear there's a cost-cutting exercise that needs to go through. Rather than laying people off, it could be merging departments together, or maybe potentially merging jobs together, or adapting the structure to try and avoid having to lose staff. And essentially, it's always bad to lose staff because remember, human resources are the most important thing in any organisation. So really, you don't really want to be losing anybody. So this is often known as restructuring, redesigning jobs, redesigning that structure of the organisation, maybe from a flat organisation to a tool, maybe from a matrix, but in a way to shuffling your resources around to make it a little bit more efficient and possibly to avoid the threat of redundancy. So often it involves moving staff to different positions, locations, joining jobs together. This can be quite positive because for some members of staff, it may give extra challenge, it might give them further training opportunities, and it may enhance their ability to challenge themselves in the job and hopefully raise their job satisfaction. On the other hand, though, redeployment can be seen negatively as a stepping stone to redundancy and can have a knock-on effect for morale. So it can also be unpopular for employees. Now, by nature, as we see with change management, human resources, employees, managers, leaders are always a little bit resistant to change and reluctant to change. Redeployment is a good example of how you adapt or how you change things to adapt to certain situations. And it can be unpopular and it can create bad morale. Now, recruitment is obviously the fundamental part of the human resource processes. If you don't have recruitment, you have no staff. So every organisation has to go through this process to get those human resources in the organisation. That's just the process of taking on new staff. So as we saw previously, you may want to carry out a staff needs analysis or skills needs analysis and identify specific need within your organisation. From that point of view, there's a number of different steps required to complete the recruitment process or complete the recruitment process effectively, should we say. So a job specification is created, and this is a document that outlines who is the ideal candidate that you're looking for. At the same time, the job description would also be created, which would be publicised in relevant media outlets, and this would detail what the job entails, who you would be reporting to, maybe the salary level, maybe the location, the hours, whatever it may be, okay? But it gives those potential candidates an idea of what they would be expected to do in the position. So from that point of view, you can there draw up a criteria to shortlist. So your criteria is obviously going to take parts from the job specification. The specification maybe they must be university educated. The job description also as well might say some sort of experience in sales. Okay, so that may have some sort of, there might be some selling part. So therefore, shortlist may say, okay, university trained, experience in sales. That gives you criteria to start working from, start whittling down some of the applicants. From there, you may want to take on the interview process. Now, depending on the type of job, the type of organisation, this can range from anything a 5-minute chat in a coffee shop to a long, drawn-out series of interviews with a number of different key people in the organisation. Also, as well, it may involve testing. It may involve you being observed on the job with the skills that you say that you have. From that point of view, you get selection, but it doesn't stop there. So you get selection, you get appointment, you there go through induction training. So that is basically an introduction to the organisation and how it works. And then obviously as well, you can be working at the same time, further training to mould you into that person that the organisation wishes you to be to contribute to the organisation and their culture. So from that point of view, you will also be appraised as to going back, like all staff will be, to make a judgment on how well you are adapting. And hopefully this will be motivational as a pat on the back, or once again identifying further training needs. So what we can see from the recruitment process, if it's done correctly and done properly and done well, it's a long, drawn-out process. It is time-consuming, it is expensive, and the key thing as well is that it will take a lot of other staff off of their actual day-to-day roles, and therefore it would lead to a decrease in productivity. So overall, that's a summary of what retention, redeployment, recruitment,